So here's a question. Are pastors special? Well, the reason I'm asking that question is I've recently been asked, I've been asked a couple times to give workshops for pastors around the area of porn and pastor struggle. And so it's caused me to kind of sit back and rewrite kind of some earlier work I'd done asking that question, talking about the unique reasons that pastors get into porn and the unique reasons that pastors stay there. So today I want to talk about this question, are pastors special? Now, first of all, let me say this. Aren't we all special? You and me are each snowflakes, right? We are one of a kind, right? We live in a society where everybody gets a special award, a participation award. So I guess you could say you are special. Although I saw something recently that said even fingerprints aren't as special as we thought they were. So that kind of messed up the whole detective thing. But let me start by answering this question, are pastors special? And let me answer it in the negative. No, you are not special, even as a pastor. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, when it comes to porn and other struggles, sexual struggles, every pastor is human. Like everyone else, we all share a common humanity. Entering into a life of ministry doesn't somehow cause you to rise up and float above the struggles of all mankind. Just in case you're wondering, you are still human. On top of that, you are not special in this way. You are a sexual person just like everyone else. I want to start, this by asking a simple question. Are pastors at least as sexual as other people? I know it's a silly question, but it is worth asking. Are pastors, do they somehow have different sex drives and temptations from other people? You know where I'm going with this, right? You know that pastors are sexual people like everyone else, and only bad things happen when we fail to acknowledge that as a starting point in our reality. Sometimes Protestants were fond at looking at the Catholic Church and going, well, see, that's what happens when you have things like celibacy requirements that denies priests the ability to be sexual people. That must be the reason why there's so many sexual abuse scandals. Of course, that worked fine until all of a sudden the finger started to get pointing at all of us Protestant churches and the cover-ups around them. And then we didn't have quite as many answers, did we? So, to answer the question, you are not special. You, as a pastor and leader, are sexual people with sexual struggles. On top of that, we all, including pastors, have a sexual history. We were all children and teenagers at one point before entering ministry. Did you have an experience being exposed to porn or acting out sexually? Did you learn to medicate yourself in sexual ways? Did you experience trauma, perhaps physical or sexual abuse? Right? Any one of these examples are simply examples of you developed and you have a sexual history. And as a result, you learned habits, and the resulting ripples of that are ingrained as they are in anybody else's life. They lie there dormant and just waiting for you to be in certain situations, they will resurface. Just being a pastor or a minister or a priest doesn't change your history, your family of origin, your pain, or the susceptibilities that you already have in place when you entered into a season of ministry. Let me put it a different way. Beyond just exposure to porn, maybe you had previous sexual partners, positive or negative girlfriend experiences, possible sexual experimentation or abuse, struggles perhaps with same-sex attraction. Again, the point is this, pastor or not, it's hard to find someone who has not been imprinted with some aspect of brokenness around their sexual development. So once again, I am simply trying to raise pastors or bring pastors back down to the waterline of common humanity. You are not special. You are like everyone else. Okay, so you got that one? Are you special? No, you're not special. However, I think it's important to acknowledge that pastors are probably going to face, or not probably, they do face some unique challenges that make them especially susceptible to things like porn and other compulsive sexual behaviors. Let me give you a few reasons for these scenarios. Number one, I think pastors often have internal emotional needs that make them susceptible. Now, I'm going to go out on the limb here, but I remember when I was in my first year of university, I shared a room with a fellow who was taking a psychology degree towards becoming a counselor. You know, as I got to know him and he shared his story of a broken childhood, I started asking him how he became interested in counseling and helping others. And over time, it was, he said basically as much. He says, my passion for psychology is partly fueled by my own desire to put the pieces of my life together in some sort of holistic and healthy way. As I observed and met other friends who were taking similar degrees, helping degrees, I realized his motives were far from unique. Now, at the time I was studying business and accounting, so of course I didn't have any of that, right? Any such problems or propensities. Of course, I was deluded and completely lacked self-awareness. But it was interesting. The point is this. He went into counseling and psychology and therapy partly out of trying to work out some of his own issues, and in doing so, he could help other people. Now, when it comes to pastors, I am not here to question, your unique call and why you want to be a pastor. But I know those reasons, those motives are probably mixed. I've been with pastors for over 30 years, and yes, I know they have a deep spiritual desire to make a kingdom difference in people's lives and to help people. Yet, it's also mixed in, I think if we are honest, it's mixed in with the desire to live out and experience a sense of personal affirmation. From God, of course, well done, good and faithful servant, but also a sense of affirmation from others. Perhaps at one level you wanted to be a pastor because it would give you a sense of value. Perhaps somewhere in there's the mixture where your value is tied in with the need to be needed. You might resist that mixed motive idea, but I'm certainly aware in my life everything I did is out of impure motives. And I think, when I ask people, why did you want to be a pastor? Maybe early on, well, I want to serve God. Great. But over time, people realize there's also an aspect of personal brokenness in there. So let's take this idea. The idea that you at some level want to receive a sense of personal affirmation. Now, so you go into the pastor's job where everybody, and I mean everybody, approaches you with a scorecard and a report card. So take that deep emotional need for affirmation, and that's challenged every time some person or some family decides that God is calling them to another church. That sense of affirmation is challenged every time you hear the success story of how the church down the road is doing amazing. That people are getting saved, revivals breaking out, the church is growing by leaps and bounds. Even if you're leading that church, there is always at one level the sense of affirmation that people are looking up to you only because you're keeping the circus going, that you are that church, you are that happening place, and you continue to need to be that place where everyone's hopes and needs are met. So when your sense of affirmation takes a hit, and I'm telling you, it takes a hit over and over again, you will find the propensity, the temptation to substitute something else to give you a good feeling. It could be your favorite porn star, or it could be that real person who tells you that you are great, that you are wanted, that you are desired, that you are the man. Right? So I think because of our mixed motives in coming into ministry, there's susceptibilities that are at place with people such as pastors. Okay, that's the first one. Number two, number one was simply there's unique emotional makeup that I think makes us susceptible. Number two, obviously we also have other relational, job-related realities that make us susceptible. I mean, pornography has been described, for example, as an intimacy disorder. Well, the opposite of the opposite of the addictive path, of course, is the path of connection. So how does that relate to the unique struggles of being a pastor? Well, if there's one common reality for many pastors is that they feel isolated. I mean, sure, they have all sorts of contact with people. There's always this mental list of, I really need to get together with so-and-so. We really need to get together with such and such a couple or such and such a family, right? So there's always that to-do list of people that you've got to maintain connections or quasi-relationship with. But study after study shows that many pastors have few deep friends. They feel lonely in their job and professions. And you could ask yourself, how is it possible that a pastor can feel lonely in such a people-oriented job? Well, one of the reasons is that we instinctively know in even our relationships with people in the church that people still carry a report card with them. Yes, we are their friend and they are our friends, but at some level, they're still expecting us to play a role and meet their expectations. Perhaps I don't think it's definitely my most painful sources of wounding in my life of ministry have been those who've called themselves my friends, yet have decided at some point that I wasn't cutting it as a pastor, their pastor. Again, I've quoted this before. I was, the guy to whom the writing on Nebuchadnezzar's wall was directed. Mene, mene, tekel parsons, you have been measured in my scales and found wanting. One of the strangest things I've noticed is that people will say to you, hey, I want you just to be a regular person, or I want you to be my friend. But you're not really a real person. They never see you as a real person. I remember when I was associate pastor and my lead guy opened up one day about his emotions. And I was like, wow, I saw him as a real person, not just my boss or my pastor. So I was susceptible to that as well. And the cumulative result of all of those relational dynamics is that we instinctively know that we need to protect ourselves. Many of us have had the thought, most of our relationships, even most of our friendships with people in our church won't last beyond the first disagreement or fender bender. So I'm going to keep people at arm's length and not allow them to get close. That's not even getting into the fact of sharing our sexual struggle with somebody. Well, if they need to see you as a pastor, how's that going to go? I remember sharing some of my struggle with one guy. And then when we were in a conflict at a board level, that was brought up. The reason why I was making this decision was because I struggled with porn, right? It gets used against you. So the point is this: we have unique relational dynamics. And it's one of the reasons why I started the podcast Pastors on Porn. It's one of the reasons why, in connecting with pastors and just other professionals as well, that I realized people need, especially in roles of leading churches or on church staffs, they need a place for safe, secure, healing environments as they seek recovery from their sexual struggles. So that's the first one is the unique emotional dynamics. Number 2 is the unique relational dynamics. Number 3 is, I would say, there are unique institutional realities that make them susceptible. Now, I am all for church denominations and elders boards that want their churches to be associated with being safe, attractive places for people to come to. The Apostle Paul was concerned that Christians would live in such a way that we would have good reputation with outsiders. Yes, there are relational and legal boundaries that, when crossed, do necessitate a pastor stepping down. I mean, if you've ever read Roy's report, all you get is these exposés of pastors after pastors, churches after churches, where they've got in trouble either from their behavior or the instinctive covering up of their behavior, right? All of that is good and healthy. And there's wise things that need to be done at a church level. At the same time, we, I believe, have taken things so far and reacted so strongly that churches want at all costs to maintain their image of we are successful, healthy families, we are winners, we are shiny people, right? And we offer you, if you are a part of our church, you can be a shiny, happy, successful person as well. You won't struggle with addictions. Your marriage will go great. You'll have sex all the time. Whatever it is, that's the type of image we want our churches to be about. We don't necessarily want to highlight people who are broken and stumbling heavenward, and we certainly don't want those who are the front image of our church, our pastors and leaders, to not be somebody that other people can look up to as having it all together, right? Nothing messes with the brand of a successful pastor than somebody who is struggling with their sexual behaviors. Every woman sitting in the church next to her husband wants her husband and to look up to that pastor going, that's the guy I want you to be. And then you hear the pastor has a struggle with porn. You're going, well, that's not who I want my husband to be. So, in the name of risk management or image or having a successful growing church, whether it's denominational or local church boards, they communicate to the pastor, yeah, sure, we want you to be human and real, but if this area is a problem for you, we have a problem, right? Sure, get help, but we don't want to know about it. I've heard that story many times. We need this church to be a shining light on the hill, which means we need you to ride in on your white horse every Sunday and give us the image of what we could be if we were just like you, right? So there are, that is alive and well in the church. That's why it's so shocking when things are exposed, when pastors texting with people in the church, when sexual behavior is exposed, people are blown away. This is completely different than the image I got. I mean, I always thought my pastor was vulnerable. And of course, pastors, we developed this great little game that we play to give the illusion of vulnerability. right? I got angry at somebody on the freeway and we all laugh. Oh yeah, I've been angry too. But pastors are simply living out oftentimes the expectation of their people. We want you to be a shiny person. That's what I mean by institutional realities. Fourth one is this: pastors have practical job-related realities that make them susceptible, right? And it's interesting. They've done studies. The difference between white-collar and blue-collar people. And I'm not elitist, and I'm not. But it is interesting that it would appear. Now, not that porn is not a struggle for many people, but it's especially predominant in white-collar people. Certainly, porn. Now, you might say, well, that's simply because white-collar people have, jobs related to computers, technology, and there's all sorts of ready access points, right? It could be simply, I think also maybe that white-collar people tend to be a lot more in their heads, and it's more it's not as working practically out in terms of a trade or whatever. I don't know where I'm going with that, other than to say that if you're around a computer all day, white collar people tend to seem to struggle more. Pastors also tend to have pretty much control of their time. They're not accountable for every hour of the day, like if they're working a 9-to-5 job. Right? So you can say, hey, I need to go out I need to go out and meet somebody. And then on the way home, you stop and you act out, or you pick something up, right? That you could do that easily. Most pastors have that. Now, even if, solo pastors, I think, have it the hardest. But of course, even if you're on a staff of a large church, you have a lot of flexibility. So just to go back over some of these places where I think, yeah, pastor, in one sense, you are special, right? You have, number one, you have emotional realities that can make you susceptible. You have relational realities that make you susceptible. You have institutional realities that make you susceptible. And you have practical job realities that make you susceptible. And the fact that, don't forget, you're still human, you're still a sexual person, and you have a unique sexual history that most likely has going to be affected by brokenness along the way. I mean, that's not even getting into the idea that, the idea of strike the shepherd and the flock will scatter, the idea that you are a target of the enemy, right? Now, you could be listening to everything I've said and you go, boy, it sounds like you're giving pastors a big out, a big excuse. And that is not my intent. All I'm trying to say is that there are unique reasons that Christian pastors and leaders are especially susceptible to sexual struggles. And I think there's unique reasons why they remain in those struggles year after year after year. So, having said that, is there hope? What are the steps that you can take to not become the subject of the next write-up in Roy's report? So here's a few just practical things. Number one, get a grip on what your vulnerabilities are. Own them. Why did you become a pastor? Where are your susceptibilities? I remember interviewing a Dr. Joe Beam who talked about the anatomy of a fall regarding a pastor. And in that podcast, he talked about how a pastor with a vulnerability to approval, especially feminine approval, meets a woman with a vulnerability to affirmation. It's like nitro and glycerin meet. And then he walks through the scenario where how it goes from a place of simply possibility to probability, and then moving from that to high probability, and then finally the fall. And it all came out of a naive pastor who was not aware of their susceptibilities. So number one, get a grip. Get and understand on your vulnerabilities. Number 2, get a therapist, right? Probably the idea there, number 1 place is to help you process your brokenness. Maybe you need help to go with what your vulnerabilities are. But I guarantee you the pressures of ministry will reveal cracks. They will strain any area of weakness in your life. And you need a help person that you can trust, a therapist that you pay where there's confidentiality, where you can process some of those things. So number 2, get a therapist. Number 3, get a friend. And by that I mean a friend most likely outside the church. I mean, there might be some unique situations, but generally somebody outside the church that you can journey with. This is one of the great things of some of our pastors groups, where people develop relationships and they're not in their local context of ministry. Number 4. So let's go back. Number 1 was get a grip on your susceptibilities. 2, get a therapist. 3, get a friend. Number 4, get a hobby. In fact, get a life outside the church. Absolutely crucial. And we all know that one of the biggest occupational hazards that we face is the fact that our world becomes smaller and smaller and is more and more consumed with just life within the church. Number 5, get a group of like-minded strugglers you can be brutally honest with. And I'm talking about brutally honest, being truly connected, not playing cops to one another, but journeying together in the struggle, in the battle that you are going to face as a pastor. If you have unique sexual struggles, it makes all the difference in the world. Let's say with porn, for example, if people don't struggle with porn, it's very hard to be honest with people who don't share what we're going through. And if all of that, you still need help, I would say get a dog. You don't have to explain to the dog why you didn't call them back. All you know is that dog is happy every time you come home without judgment. So one of those things or the other. So to answer the question, are you special, Pastor? No, you're not special. But you are unique in some ways, and you're going to have some unique struggles, and you're going to need to take those into account if you are going to have a successful, long-lasting ministry that you look back on and go, wow, I made it through that. God has been there with me, but I also had my eyes wide open to what I needed to do to make this journey. So there you go. We'll see everybody next time. It's been a while since I've done Pastors on Porn, but hopefully that gives some ideas for you. And let me also say, if you are a pastor, you are in a position of trust and you're looking for help, it's January, the middle of January right now. We're going to be starting a new pastors and group in February of 2024. So if you're interested, reach out to me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.